Hey there, comic fam. Welcome back to Climbing Comics. In today's sesh, we'll be chatting about Jim Lee's first published work in Samurai Santa #1. Hey there, comic fam. Welcome back to Climbing Comics. So today, I'll be taking a little bit of a departure from our normal first appearance breakdown. And since we're in the middle of the holiday season, I thought, why not bring up a book that, has Santa in it? And coincidentally, has one of my favorite artists and creators as his first published work as well. So this is Jim Lee. So currently, Jim Lee is the chief creative officer and publisher at DC. Before that, he was doing Image. Before that, he was like writing a lot of the X-Men. Before that, he was, he had his own, I guess, publishing company. I think it's Wildstorm Productions. This is his whole Wildcats type of books. Before that was even Alpha Flight and Punisher War Journal. So, that was all like kind of in the 90s, 2000s. But where he first started, what I read is he initially was not going to be in the comic book industry as his parents were driving him towards another career path. But he started to dive into it around 1985, 1986. So this is when Solstin, one of the publishers outside of the big two, DC and Marvel, and there were a ton of others, were just releasing lots of different types of books. This publication company had a ton of different books in terms of some weird books. They had books about the Texas Chainsaw Samurai. There was another This Samurai book. They had books about Ronald Reagan. It just was an eclectic pieces of work. So in this book I wanted to break down today, it is pretty funny. It was definitely a sign of its times. It was maybe not the most politically correct, but it was a fun read regardless. So of course, and I'll show the cover here. It's a great black cover with Samurai Santa on it. And so this came out in 1986 by Philip Clark Jr. as the writer, and the artists were Don Seacrease and Jim Lee. So in the very first page, they had a little bit of a biography of each of the two, and this was Jim Lee. And it was funny. He just showed like the top of his head because I guess he was shy at that point. Before his meteoric rise in the comic book industry, like just 5 years after that with X-Men. So how this comic starts, it's pretty funny. It's a samurai on 34th Street. So you kind of start off in this department store, Kruger's department store, and there's this main character, Endicott. So Endicott is like, I guess, the store manager, and he's like, all right, let's bring out Santa so he could talk to the children. So they go to the back room, and Mr. Osborne, I guess his boss, was like, hey, where's the Santa? We have like 2 minutes left. Let's go. Chop, chop. So as they go to the back, they end up finding out that Santa is inebriated, so he had a little bit too much. They were trying to feed him coffee. But he was in no state of mind to be able to like be the Santa for that department store. So what Endicott tries to do is he asks around, the people that work in the warehouse. He was asking around if they'd do it. He'd offer them double pay. They said no, and he ended up going to the toy department, where he essentially found this guy named Sam, who for some reason is wearing this gi, like this, the outfit for doing martial arts. So he's like, hey, we need your help. We need you to do this. And it's funny. He just gets so serious. He's like, say no more, Mr. Endicott. If you need assistance from your humble worker, my blade and I anxiously await. And then Endicott's like, wait. I don't need you to kill anybody. Just listen. I need you to dress up as Santa. So he's like, all right, the Santa, info, just talk to the kids, ask them what they like, what they want, and then just be very cheerful. So this works out. They did pretty well. And, Endicott's boss, Mr. Olson, or Osborne, says, all right, just go to the try to find another Santa for tomorrow, but we'll be okay. So you kind of see this cutscene to these kids playing football, and they're playing with this like kind of ragged football in the middle of wintertime. It's snowing, and this other Santa comes out of the alleyway for some reason. He's like, hey kids, why do you have like this really old football? Go ask your parents for another one. And then one of the kids is like, oh, my parents are getting me clothes, they don't have enough for Christmas. And then this bad Santa is essentially like, if your parents really love you, they'll get you more gifts and more toys. Just go home and ask them for more gifts and more toys. The kids start crying and stuff, and this evil Santa, you see his eyes, he's like very evil. You kind of see the setup of this bad Santa and then the samurai Santa, and they're two different philosophies. You cut back in to Sam, and he leaves the department store wearing the suit. And then so Endicott was like, hey, like, you don't have to leave with a suit. That's fine. But then he says, this is what Sam says: when a warrior takes on a role, he must do it 24 hours a day. Good night, sir. And then he walks away. So as he's walking away, there's like these, what they call them, I guess they were hoodlums, and they were trying to rob this kind of older lady. They steal her purse and start running away. And then, this is like kind of reminiscent of the Spider-Man scene when the bad guy runs away. But this time, Samurai Santa, for some reason, has size. Like, those weapons, like those fork-like weapons, like Raphael from the Ninja Turtles. So he takes them out, and then he starts fighting them, like he disarms them because for some reasons these guys have nunchucks and whatnot. And he basically gives the lady back her purse. So you see everyone clapping, very happy about this, but he was still wearing the suit, right? So all of this is in the news, and Endicott reads it in the news the next day, and he's like, oh no, man, Mr. Osborn's not going to be happy about this. But the thing is, Mr. Osborn comes in and he's like, hey, this is perfect. We have our super Santa. There's going to be people coming from the tri-state area. For some reason, he talks about, oh yeah, people from 50 or 60 miles away will hear about this. So you could definitely tell this is a sign of the times. At the same time, you see Sam coming in, and he's like, feels very bad. He's like, sorry, I put a bad name to Kruger's department store because of what I've done while I was wearing the suit. And then, but Endicott's like, no, you're good. Just put on the suit. I think everyone will love this. So he puts on the suit again this next day, goes out, and the line goes out the door. There's like newscasters outside filming about this new Super Santa, and it's pretty great. Cutscene to Bad Santa. These kids again are playing, kind of sledding up and down the street, and like they're like, hey, it's Santa Claus. And so he basically tells him the same thing: ask your parents for more toys right now, because if they love you, they'll give you more toys. And they're like, but Santa, like, shouldn't you give us toys? And he's like, I have only enough space in my sled for like maybe one toy per kid, but you deserve more. Go ask your parents for more. And then so you're like, this sounds kind of weird, very like commercial Santa. Cutscene again. You kind of see the parallel disparity between him and Sam. Sam is talking to Endicott and asking him, what is this like kind of meaning of Christmas, right? So what he says, it's kind of having goodwill to fellow man, essentially, is what Endicott says. And then you see Sam thinking like, what does all this gift giving have to do with kind of being good to your fellow man? And so Endicott's like, oh, it's just like showing a sign of appreciation. So all right, just go with it. It'll be fine. And then so you see Sam walking home in his Santa, like not in his Santa suit, but like kind of in his own suit. He sees this homeless person. He gives him money. He gives him the clothes off of his back, and he goes home. So the next day, Endicott, Mr. Osborn, and Sam are all kind of meeting together because I guess Mr. Kruger himself, the name of the department store, is coming over to see what's going on with all of this good news. So, all right, they tell Sam, hey, here's this sack of gifts. Let's give them to the kids, right? To kind of the underprivileged kids. We've made enough money this year. And you kind of see in the background Endicott and Mr. Osborn talking, like, what gifts did you give them? And he's like, oh, all these gifts that we couldn't even sell. Like, no one wants these gifts. We'll just give them for free. And he's like, okay, but then why do these gifts look like they're in this weird small shape? So you kind of see that a replacement of those gifts happen, right? So instead of getting these toys, you get this book kind of called The Religious Soul. Essentially, it's kind of a summary of like what the meaning of Christmas and giving and kind of having that that care for your fellow like human is like. So you see this happen, and Mr. Endicott and Kruger are not happy, as well as Mr. Osborne. So all of a sudden you see Mr. Osborne kind of walk away, and he's like, oh, I got to do something about this. Like, Mr. Kruger's not going to be happy. So all of a sudden you see Bad Santa jump out, and you're like, dude, this guy is Bad Santa. And it kind of makes sense. He's the one trying to push all these gifts on these kids. So he's like, all right, I went to like the sports department and I found this crossbow. And then he starts shooting at Sam with a crossbow. And for some reason, Sam has a samurai sword, obviously, because he's Samurai Santa. And he like chops like arrows in half as they're coming towards his face. It's pretty ridiculous. So you see him like kind of slice, but slice enough just to take the Santa suit off. And it's actually Mr. Osborne. And you're like, no, that can't be. So he kind of like, dismantles him, and he's kind of unconscious, and you see Endicott like saying, hey Sam, all right, that's done, let's give out those gifts. And Sam's like, did you not see what happened? What like this means? Like the spirit of Christmas is not gifts. Like, this guy's crazy. And then so you see Sam kind of take off his Santa suit, and he's like, all right, I'm kind of done with this. Like, I'm giving you the greatest gift of Christmas is the understanding and the knowledge of being kind to people more than just one day of the year, and not just only with gifts. So he leaves the department store, and Endicott is like, hey, come back. But by the time he goes outside, Endicott is like, it's snowing, and then, Samurai Santa is gone. And then Endicott's like, Sam? And then you kind of see the cityscape. So essentially that's how it ends. This is a very ridiculous book. There's a lot going on, but you see what the writer is trying to do in this kind of Christmas special. It's pretty interesting because the art style is very different than the art style that I'm used to with the X-Men 1, with all of the the very Jim Lee style of drawing. It's very different. But, this is, when he first started in like 1986, like a lot has progressed between then and his release in the early 90s with X-Men, and kind of even his future very similar style in Wildcats and further on into like his work in DC. So Jim Lee is definitely like a really cool artist. His meteoric rise of getting to where he is now from where he started with this book, it's pretty nuts. Like a huge change has happened between his 1986 work to even the 90s work to 2000s to today. So I definitely appreciate reading this book and kind of being able to bring this story to you, because this is, a piece of the Jim Lee history. And I think it's something that I'm going to try to do next year as well. Just look into different artists and see where they started and kind of see their path and where they got to where they are now. I'm going to end this off by kind of just saying thank you to the comic book community, because this year has been pretty nuts in terms of my comic collecting, my comic reading, and the knowledge and the expansion of that knowledge throughout the year. So definitely thank you to everyone in the comic book community who's like have mentioned this book, introduced me to like these different storylines of like different artists as well. I could definitely not have found this without a lot of my friends kind of telling me about them. So how I'm going to close this off is from my comic journey to yours. Happy holidays. Thanks all. Bye.